La deuxième session se réfère dans son sujet à la séparation des pouvoirs. La Cour constitutionnelle est une gardienne importante de ce principe constitutionnel qui est un principe pilier, un principe recteur de l'état de droit et du constitutionnalisme contemporain. Il est un grand honneur pour moi de dire le bienvenu à Madame Sanita Osipova, la vice-présidente de la Cour constitutionnelle de la Létonie, à Madame Arta Rama Hajrizi, la présidente de la Cour constitutionnelle du Kosovo, et Monsieur Dragoljub Draskovic, président de la Cour constitutionnelle du Montenegro. Soyez les bienvenus et I know that they will speak in English, so that I welcome you also in English. And as you treat a subject, the separation of powers, which is decisive for rule of law and for contemporary constitutionalism, so also this panel will be of high interest. So, of course, I would like if you could observe the 15 minutes rules, or more or less, please more. And so I ask now, and according to the list in the program, I ask now the Vice President of the Latvian Constitutional Court, Madame Sanita Osipova, to take the floor.
Thank you very much. I would like to tell my thanks for Andorra's Constitutional Court for hospitality, and I'm really glad to speak here about financial security of judges in the context of the principle of the separation of powers. I shall start with the very foundations. Charles Louis Montesquieu once said, "Political liberty appears in countries where there is no place for the abuse of power. But constant experience shows us that every man invested with power is apt to abuse it, and he is inclined to stretch it perpetuity." Here I can conclude that also today we can say in general the same. Power continues to be the test that not all are able to pass. With the Constitution of USA, which in 1789 introduced into the structure of the state the threefold division of the state power by Montesquieu, the judicial power was constitutionally consolidated as an independent institutional and functional branch of the state power. Thus, on the one hand, a foundation was laid for a democratic state governed by the rule of law, the model of which, in different variations, was introduced in many countries of the world during the 19th and 20th century. On the other hand, since the end of the 18th century, the legal doctrine and also the judicial powers themselves have constantly fought to achieve both real independence from and equal authority with the legislator and the executive. Even today, the courts still have to remind the other branches that the three powers are not arranged vertically with the legislator on top, but horizontally, with each of the powers performing its function within the scope of authority granted to it by the sovereign, the people. It was highlighted already by Georg Jelinek at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, because this requirement follows from the principle of the separation of powers and a state governed by the rule of law. The principle of the separation of powers includes also the requirement that the constitutional bodies, which are equally important, should show mutual respect and mutual loyalty to each other. The parliament and the government are the bearers of the political power, whereas the task of the court is to be neutrally apolitical. This significant difference, to a certain extent, sets for the court different rules of the game. Compared to the parliament and the government, inter alia, regarding the right to affect its remuneration and the principles in accordance with which this remuneration is set. Therefore, both other powers must understand the need for an independent judicial power and its role in a state governed by the rule of law. At the same time, taking into consideration that a judge's independence differs from that of a member of the parliament, it is a complicated task, even more so because for a judge to take up office, he has to meet the requirements set for education and experience, whereas the parliament and the government is formed by the people, in the selection of which the sovereign relies on the personal traits of the candidates, their public reputation and charisma, rather than experience and education. The state governed by the rule of law doesn't exist if the principle of the separation of powers isn't complied with, as the implementation of this principle leads to establishment and functioning of an independent, qualified, and responsible court. Today I want to examine the implementation of the principle of separation of powers from one rather narrow perspective, which is the perspective of judges' financial security, turning to the system of judges' remuneration. The choice of the topic was determined by the experience in the office of a judge of the Constitutional Court of Latvia. Having worked at the court for 6 years, I have participated already twice in the so-called judge salary cases. In total, during its 25 years of experience, the Constitutional Court of Latvia has examined 4 cases regarding judge salaries. Basically, examination of the constitutionality of judge remuneration means reviewing, on the one hand, whether the judge's work is appropriately remunerated so as to guarantee the independence of the judiciary. But on the other hand, the other aspect that needs to be examined is requirement of the separation of powers and the balance of the state powers. Namely, in this case, it must be examined whether the judge's remuneration is appropriately correlated with the remuneration paid to the officials of the other constitutional bodies. Acting as the judge rapporteur in the most recent case of judge remuneration, I found that at least one such case had been adjudicated in almost every country. It's interesting that the cases of judge salaries have been examined not only in the new democracies of Europe, like Latvia, Lithuania, Slovenia, Poland, but also in countries with considerable experience of democratic legal culture and implementation of the principle of the separation of powers, for example, in Germany. All this visibly outlines the existence of a common problem, at least in the model of the separation of powers implemented in the continental European democracies. I have not conducted a more extensive research. At the same time, it must be emphasized that in all the countries I have referred to, the principle of separation of powers is duly implemented because it is exactly the proper implementation of the principle of separation of powers that has ensured the possibility to resolve the threat to judges' financial independence, because this problem was brought before and resolved by the constitutional courts. I shall share Latvians' experience. The first 3 of these cases, that is the case adjudicated by the Constitutional Court on 8 January 2010, case adjudicated on 22nd June 2010, and case adjudicated on 28 March 2012 were linked to the legislator's activities during the period of rapid economic recession. However, the judgment of 26 October 2017 was adopted when the economy was already stabilized and was improving. Within the period from the end of 2008 until 2010, the legislator in Latvia, but not only in Latvia, was looking for a way to stabilize the national economy by rapidly decreasing the state expenditure. The solutions had to be found immediately, and there was no time to sufficiently examine and discuss them. Therefore, the possible threats to ensuring the principle of check and balance between the state powers, as well as the limits to permissible restrictions of fundamental rights, were not always given due consideration. During the period of economic crisis, the Constitutional Court of Latvia was overloaded. We were overrun by applications based on the legislation adopted by the legislator during the time of crisis. The Constitutional Court of Latvia continues, even today, to examine cases based on restrictions to a person's fundamental rights established during this period. Although it has repeatedly recognized that in a state where the economic situation has stabilized, it is the legislator's obligation to re-examine the validity of restrictions on fundamental rights established in the circumstances of economic recession. The judge's remuneration fell within the general flow of budget saving. Alongside decreased benefits and pensions, prohibition to pay bonuses to civil servants, etc. However, the Constitutional Court of Latvia didn't examine this problem only from the perspective of judge's fundamental right to appropriate remuneration for their work. Even so, these cases were initiated on the basis of a constitutional complaint submitted by judges. The Constitutional Court examined the judge's remuneration in terms of judges' independence, in 2010, mentioning for the first time in the case law of the Constitutional Court of Latvia the judge's financial security as one of the safeguards of the independence of the judiciary, stating that by decreasing judges' remuneration, the legislator can exert political influence on the judicial power by using economic manipulations. I would like to emphasize that the Constitutional Court of Latvia called for a careful assessment of the system of judges' remuneration, not for a simple increase because it is stated in the judgment. Unmotivated increase of the judges' remuneration could also be considered as influencing the judicial power. The court recognized that a judge's financial security also means that a judge was sure that the remuneration established for him upon commencing performance of his duties of office would not be subsequently decreased. This is a classical finding which has been built into the foundation of the independence of the judiciary already in Constitution of the USA. Various 20th and 21st centuries have brought into our minds the awareness of the impact of inflation upon the judges' remuneration. Therefore, the Constitutional Court of Latvia included in its judgment another aspect of the financial security of judges, which has been recognized in the case law of other countries. If the cost of living increases, there should be an appropriate increase of the judge's salary. The judgment of 2010 explained that the legislator that an automatic mechanism for calculating the remuneration for judges' work should be included in the law that would ensure the remuneration was adjusted. The Constitutional Court explained to the legislator the criteria the compliance with which could ensure that judges were entitled to remuneration that guaranteed their independence. Another concept that follows from the concept the judge's financial security appeared in this judgment, the actual value of judges' remuneration. That is, that the remuneration should ensure that a judge's standard of living would not change in the wake of economic fluctuations. It has already been established in the case law of European constitutional courts that the principle of judges' financial security requires the state to set such remuneration for a judge's office that would allow him not only to provide adequately for himself, but also for his family members. Moreover, a judge's remuneration should be examined in interconnection with restrictions imposed on combining offices, which for judges traditionally have been rather strict. This in the cases of 2015, case 2015-1001, case 2015-2201 at the Constitutional Court of Latvia examined restrictions on combining offices for a judge, that is the right to provide assistance to a family member with special needs and to receive remuneration for it, which was not referred by law as one of additional jobs allowed for a judge. In families where the only person capable of working was not a judge, and when it was impossible to hire a professional assistant for the modest remuneration granted by the state, the assistance was provided by the members of the family themselves, concluding a respective agreement with the municipality. The judges, however, were prohibited by law to do so. The Constitutional Court of Latvia, in examining the restrictions from perspective the principle of equality, concluded that the contested norm as to its nature is neutral, but that it does not envisage differential regulation with respect to persons who are in different situations. However, it gives rise to restrictions on the petitioner's equal rights. The Constitutional Court held that the norm was incompatible with the Constitution because it was not appropriate for achieving the legitimate aim, preventing a conflict of interests. When viewing this case outside the function of the administrations of justice in terms of compliance by the principle of judges' financial security, it can be concluded that both applicants were judges of the first instance court, for whom the salary for providing the assistance service to a family member with special needs was a matter of the family's subsistence. A situation like this, in which a judge, without receiving additional financial resources, is unable to support family member with special needs, may jeopardize the independence of courts. Strict restrictions have been imposed on every judge with aim of ensuring to other persons the right to fair trial. However, in Latvia in 2015 and 2016, these restrictions were not proportionate with the judge's salary and social guarantees. This, the state, by eliminating some risks of corruption, had created other instead. To conclude with a summary, the principle of the separation of powers requires the establishment of an independent judiciary so that it could function in the interests of the sovereign, guaranteeing the protection of every person's freedoms and rights. This can be implemented only by ensuring the system of mutual check and balance in the functioning of the branches of the state power. Inter alia, regarding the judge remuneration, unfortunately, it is rather typical of these powers of the state which holds the state purse, the legislator and the executive, to forget that an appropriate remuneration of judges is not their free choice, but rather one of the preconditions for fair trial and judges' independence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Vice President Osipova, for this highly interesting contribution, which underlines rightly that the judges' financial situation is, of course, very important for the main element of the judges, so to say, the judicial independence, and this is a core question also of separation of powers. Merci beaucoup pour votre contribution sur la situation, la garantie de la situation financière des juges, ce qui garantit également la séparation de pouvoirs, c'est-à-dire l'indépendance, un élément primordial, l'indépendance des juges. Alors, now, let me give the floor to the President of the Constitutional Court of Kosovo, Mrs. Arta Hajrizi. Please take the floor.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, first I want to thank Professor Reiner for giving me the floor, and I would also wish to avail from the opportunity of having the floor to thank the President Batlori for invitation and wonderful hospitality in beautiful Andorra. It is my distinct pleasure to share with the renowned audience my thoughts on the topic of separation of powers, as well as share examples on how the Constitutional Court of Kosovo protects the legislative, executive, and judiciary powers. I will also address the issue of separation of powers between central and decentralized level of governance by referring to some specific case law of our court. And lastly, I will conclude my presentation by briefly elaborating on the criticism that our case law generates from political parties, academia, and others. The new and first constitution of Republic of Kosovo, enacted in 2008, makes explicit references to the principle of separation of powers as well as checks and balances. These two principles are the ruling principles when it comes to the form of government in Kosovo. It is precisely through these specific references that the Constitutional Court has rendered its jurisprudence, clarifying, when asked to, the constitutionally guaranteed protection to the legislative, executive, and judiciary. The Constitutional Court of Kosovo is equipped with ex post and ex ante jurisdictional mechanisms of constitutional review. Our Constitutional Court secures the compatibility of laws with the Constitution and serves as the final interpreter of the Constitution by performing abstract and concrete norm control. The President, Assembly, government, specific number of deputies, and the Ombudsperson, all authorized parties to put forward constitutional challenges before the Constitutional Court. Based on referrals filed by them, the Constitutional Court adjudicated inter alia also on separation of powers warranties. The ex post review of enacted legislation enables the court to check whether the laws adopted by the legislative branch are in compliance with the constitutional guarantees of other branches of government as well. In such instances, among others, the Constitutional Court checks issues related to the balance of powers between the legislative, executive, and judiciary, as well as whether the separation of powers between the central and local level is being correctly maintained. The same mechanism enables the Constitutional Court to check ex post whether the government's decisions have interfered with the constitutional guarantees of other branches of the government, the Assembly, or the judiciary. For instance, the government's intention to make a uniform classification and categorization of job positions without taking into account the specific constitutional status of independent institutions, specifically enumerated in Constitution as independent, was challenged before the court, and it was considered as unconstitutional interference in accordance with the principles of separation of powers. In another occasion, it has been emphasized in our jurisprudence that the principle of separation of powers requires the Constitutional Court to respect the setting of policies by the respective constitutional bodies. The key decision in policy making for the governance of the country must be made by the bodies which have democratic legitimation, namely the Assembly and the government. The Constitutional Court will only look at whether a particular law or decision violates rights and freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution, and whether the checks and balances are being properly maintained in the exercise of duties provided to specific arms of the government. Following a request of the government to clarify the issue of immunity that the deputies of Assembly, the President, and the members of the government have, the Constitutional Court rendered a very interesting decision, whereby the principle of separation of powers was also at play. The Court stipulated that the essence of the independence and effective functioning of the three branches of government is the immunity provided to the persons embodying these powers. The Court clarified that the issues of the immunity in details for all branches of government. The main argument was that the immunity is needed in order to protect the independence, efficiency, and interferences from other branches. In respect of the deputies in particular, the Court stated that without the freedom to perform their functions and not to be afraid of retaliation whilst they are acting as deputies of the Assembly, there is a danger that the Assembly will not be able to fulfill its constitutional function. The ex-ante review of proposed amendments to the Constitution gives a final say to the Constitutional Court in deciding whether such amendments diminish the human rights and freedoms provided by Constitution, and whether such amendments are in compliance with the letter and spirit of the Constitution. In most occasions, the Constitutional Court has approved the proposed amendments to the Constitution as being in compliance with it. However, there were instances when the Constitutional Court considered that certain proposed amendments would interfere with the warranty of separation of powers to the detriment of one branch of government. For instance, the Constitutional Court of Kosovo disapproved some proposed amendments to the Constitution because it considered that extending the powers to the President of country to send back the names of judges that were being proposed for appointment by constitutionally independent institution as Kosovo Judicial Council is an amendment which diminishes the right and freedom guaranteed by the Constitution, and that it would contribute to delay in administration of justice and effectiveness of redress before the court. Moreover, the court considered that such amendments would also be contrary to the judicial protection of rights because the people would not have the right to access to judges that need to decide their cases. In this specific example, the Constitutional Court protected the separation of powers in favor of judiciary and prohibited the enactment of such amendments to the Constitution. I will briefly address the separation of powers between the central and decentralized level of governance and the case law of Constitutional Court in this regard. The Constitution of Kosovo provides for a special constitutional mechanism through which municipalities may contest the constitutionality of laws or acts of the government, infringing upon the responsibilities and diminishing their revenues. Up to date, our jurisprudence has not developed a lot at this point. However, this constitutional guarantee is a very important considering that municipalities are a basic form of self-government in Kosovo. The Constitutional Court has found that the separation of powers doctrine between the central level and decentralized level would be unconstitutionally interfered with if associations of municipalities are to be granted with the right to propose amendments to legislation. The court considered that the Constitution has provided an exhaustive list of authorities or authorized bodies to propose a legislative initiative, that is, President, government, deputies of the Assembly, and at least 10,000 citizens. These prerogatives are specifically stipulated in the Constitution, and the rights to initiate legislation cannot be extended to other bodies via an act which is below the Constitution. Moreover, the court has emphasized that using ambiguous terms in the making of legislation that has an impact on separation of powers at this level is unacceptable, because in accordance with European Court case law, a law must be sufficiently accessible, precise, and foreseeable. That is to say that if the right and duties in respect of division of powers between the central and local level are not clear, such regulation does not fulfill the constitutional requirement and thus is incompatible with the Constitution. I will address the last part of this topic, which is the critiques that the decisions of the constitutional courts are generating from the political parties, academics, and others. In a meeting of the Joint Council on Constitutional Justice in late 2017, it was noted that these days attacks on constitutional courts and on constitutionalisms are nowhere unknown. A report by Justice Bayer from the Federal Constitutional Court of Germany illustrated perfectly the current challenges of constitutionalism and the role of constitutional courts in that regard. She made an important distinction between an attack and a critique by emphasizing that the latter is needed and the courts should listen to it, whilst the former is an appropriate way of criticizing courts for delivering what they are mandated to do. In connection with this important distinction, I want to move the discussion in the scene of Kosovo. We will soon complete the first 10-year cycle of constitutional review since the adoption of the new constitution and the establishment of the Constitutional Court. During this period, the Constitutional Court issued highly delicate and important decisions, which on different instances made one or other political force satisfied or dissatisfied. The expression of dissatisfaction at times was harsh, but I cannot recall many situations where such expression could qualify as an attack on the court, as it happened, for instance, in the UK Supreme Court and the European Court last year, following the respective unpopular decisions with respect to Brexit and prisoners' right to vote. The most harsh instance which would qualify as an attack rather than a critique was an occasion after a decision of the court. A political party organized a protest which ended before the doors of the Constitutional Court, and on that day paint color was thrown on the building of the court as means of protest. As far as the so-called critique of reasoning, we do not feel particularly satisfied with the coverage and the amount of academic critique that we get. There are not many authors or academics that write about our decisions and publish a critique of reasoning, a critique which is always worth listening. For instance, the European Court receives at times an overwhelming amount of academic critique, which I consider that has helped the European Court to fine-tune its jurisprudence over the years. In line with that, I would consider that a more substantial critique of reasoning from the political parties, academia, the media, and others would help our courts in performing their mandate even better. I ought to emphasize an important point here. Despite that the Constitutional Court of Kosovo faces criticism at particular times, its decisions are respected and complied by all parties involved, including public institutions which are bound to implement. The judicial culture whereby the finality of the decision of the Constitutional Court must be respected at all times and no matter what is very much present and important in Kosovo as well. This is an important feature of a democratic country, and it is a feature which shows a lot about how the critique is being directed and dealt with. So as long as the finality of the decisions is being respected, the criticism, and especially the critique of reasoning, should be more than welcomed by the courts. Ladies and gentlemen, these were some of the points that I thought were most pertinent to raise for this panel discussion within the frame of the time provided. And as a recap, I would say 3 points. The principle of separation of powers and checks and balances is a guiding principle with respect to government in Kosovo, and the Constitutional Court has awarded warranty to each brand, depending on the cases that it had before. The Constitutional Court protects the separation of powers between central level of governance and decentralized level by making sure that the guarantees provided by the Constitution of the respective bodies are respected. And despite the criticism that the Constitutional Court faces, its decisions are not disputed or not implemented, an action which would diminish the role of the court in the society. And while thanking you for your attention and consideration, I look forward to any comments or questions that we might have. So thank you, Professor. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. President. You highlighted rightly, I think, the horizontal and vertical dimension of separation of powers, and also the high importance which is attributed by your court in Kosovo to this fundamental principle. And you draw the distinction, you have drawn the distinction also between attack and critique. Critique is welcome, attack is maybe inappropriate. And merci beaucoup pour votre excellente contribution qui a compris les deux dimensions de la séparation de pouvoir, une séparation horizontale. Vous avez expliqué de manière très détaillée cet horizontalisme et la dimension verticale qui est importante, et notamment je viens de l'Allemagne, ici cette séparation de pouvoir entre la fédération et les 16 États membres a une grande importance, même dans la jurisprudence constitutionnelle. Et vous avez également fait cette distinction entre attaque et critique contre la jurisprudence, ou disons avec référence à la jurisprudence de votre cours. Merci beaucoup, et ça nous donne beaucoup de sujets, peut-être beaucoup de matière pour la discussion. Maintenant, now let me give the floor to the President of the Constitutional Court of Montenegro, Mr. Dragoljub Draskovic. Please take the floor.
Honorable President, Vice President, and the judges of the Constitutional Court of Andorra, Honorable Chairman Arnold, Honorable ladies and gentlemen, I express my sincere gratitude on invitation which has given me honor to take part in a conference marking 25th anniversary of the existence of the Constitutional Court of the Principality of Andorra. On behalf of the Constitutional Court of Montenegro and myself, I cordially congratulated this jubilee to colleagues from the Constitutional Court of Andorra. In addition, I wish you much success in the future fulfillment of important tasks. My subject is closure, theoretical determination of the constitutional and legal status of the Constitutional Court of Montenegro within the constitutional and legal system of Montenegro, which should hopefully contribute to a broader and more accurate understanding of its constitutionally defined position and role in that system. Just like many European countries, such as Austria and Germany, Montenegro introduced the European civil law model of constitutional protection based on Kelsen theory of a centralized control system where reviews are performed by a special and independent body, the Constitutional Court, along with all the basic elements of the concept in terms of appointing judges, decision-making, for and consequences of the court decisions, etc. According to the Constitution of Montenegro, the system of governance is organized according to the principle of separation of powers, which is defined in a special part of the Constitution which deals with government in general. At the same time, the Constitutional Court protects the constitutionality and legality and defined in a special part of the Constitution as well. From such a structural concept, the Constitution clearly separates the Constitutional Court's position from all other branches and state authority bodies and establish it as a special constitutional category with the constitutional and legal order. The highest constitutional body and constitutional power sui generis, which has a special place within the entire structure of state authorities. The position and role of the Constitutional Court of Montenegro within the constitutional and legal order of Montenegro essentially represent a basic for the potential analysis of the mutual relationship among the Constitutional Court and other state authorities and bodies. This aspect of the Constitutional Court position and role can be specifically observed in relation of the position and role of the judiciary in that system. It was precisely the introduction of the constitutional complaint by the Constitution of Montenegro in 2007 as the new legal remedy for the protecting the citizens' rights against the decisions of state authorities and above all against the decisions of ordinary courts, when the decision of the judiciary and immediately subjected to constitutional review that further brought the attention and emphasized the relationship among the Constitutional Court and ordinary courts in Montenegro. The constitutional procedure represents neither an ordinary nor an extraordinary legal remedy, but rather a special institute for reviewing individual state authority acts from the perspective of the protection of human rights and freedoms. The constitutional complaint procedure before Constitutional Court of Montenegro especially point towards the strong connection and interrelationship between the judiciary and the Constitutional Court, and basically towards the participation of the judiciary in procedure before the Constitutional Court, but also the participation of the Constitutional Court in the protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms if they could not be protected before the ordinary courts. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. You have analyzed the competences of the Montenegro Constitutional Court and so revealed also and underlined the importance as an institution for guaranteeing a separation of powers and rule of law. And we see here that fundamental rights protection, rule of law, and separation of powers, these are elements of a common idea, a common concept, and that, well, one element is not thinkable without the existence of the other. And so we have seen this internal connection of the various dimensions of rule of law also in your contribution. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup pour votre contribution qui nous a expliqué la construction de votre système de la justice constitutionnelle à Monténégro et nous a révélé également de nouveau cette interdépendance entre les diverses dimensions de l'état de droit, des concepts que je pense que ça nous donne vraiment une vision globale sur le constitutionnalisme qui, l'état de droit et la séparation de pouvoir se trouvent à la base de ce constitutionnalisme. Merci pour nos participants et maintenant j'ai le plaisir d'ouvrir le débat. Le débat, ça veut dire pas seulement sur les contributions de notre table ronde, mais également de la première table ronde d'aujourd'hui et, si Dominique le permet, également pour, sur disons, les réflexions fondamentales sur état de droit, démocratie et les autres dimensions. Oui. Et je vous prie, si vous posez une question ou faites un commentaire, de nous dire votre nom et votre peut-être pays de provenance. Et je vous prie également peut-être de faire de brefs commentaires et des brèves questions. Et pour ceux qui répondent, ce sont aussi naturellement pas seulement nous, je pense, mais les autres participants également. Les réponses se tiendront dans les cadres de notre temps qui est un peu limité. Schnutz, Monsieur Durp, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you for these excellent presentations, also in the morning. And I would like to have three. I think it's on. Yep. So I would like to thank for these excellent presentations, also those in the first session, but also now. And I have two, or maybe with your permission, if I can ask questions also to the last speakers from the last session, I would even have three questions. To Vice President Osipova, I would like to only to have a short question whether there is a link in Latvia between the salaries of judges and that of civil servants, whether there is an automatic, because your case law, if I understood correctly, protects the salaries of judges, but what happens if then there is a link between the two, and what would be the result of such a de-linkage between the two, if only the salaries of judges are protected. To President Hajrizi, I would like to ask you about this unconstitutional constitutional amendment. You said that the Constitutional Court found that the amendment of the Constitution itself was unconstitutional. What is concretely the basis for this competence? Is it a hierarchy within the Constitution that you have certain unamendable principles? And even if this is the court specifically empowered to find constitutional amendments unconstitutional? And then, Mr. Chair, can we also ask questions to the first speakers? You seem to mention that, yeah. From the first panel.
Yes, you want to add some further questions to other speakers?
Yes, if this is possible, but this is your choice.
Well, maybe if it's not too many questions, but you have one or more questions? One question, please add this.
It would be to President Šujok from Hungary, who presented this a very human rights friendly concept of the historic constitution. This was really interesting and I found this very positive, because of course it comes close to, it really focuses on dignity, it focuses on the human rights protection. It sounded very positive, notably also the idea that the court has the task to tone down populist tendencies. The Constitutional Court of Hungary has also had a judgment on constitutional identity. And I would like to ask President Šujok to explain the relationship between the concepts of constitutional identity and of the historic constitution, whether they overlap or whether this is something different. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I add that Dr. Schnutz-Dürr, Venice Commission Director of the Constitutional Law and Justice Department. No, we ask the participant please to identify themselves. You are well known, of course. I think that we now, if you allow the other speakers, you have been the first.
Thank you very much for question. In Latvia, it's interesting situation because we have 4 judgments about one case. Until 2010, we had separate law for judge salary, and it wasn't enough money for judges, and judges came to Constitutional Court, and after this judgment, Parliament made link between judges' salary and civil servants, but it was made in economical crisis time with prohibition to pay bonuses to civil servants. And in this time, it was balance. But after 3 or 4 years, economic stabilized, and half of civil servants' remuneration was bonuses and not salary. And after that was this fourth decision of Constitutional Court of Latvia. And it was 2017, and Parliament has time until 2019 to solve this problem.
Thank you very much. Now, I think yes.
Thank you, Professor. Okay. Thank you, Schnutz, for the question. The Constitution of Kosovo, as you know, it was drafted in a very specific circumstances, and it's known as one of the most rigid constitutions. And in order to have any amendments to the Constitution, it requires a priori review of any proposal to the amendments by the Constitutional Court. That is one, and then it requires 2/3 of the approvals by the majority in the Assembly, as well as the 2/3 of the minorities represented in the Assembly. So it's double 2/3 majority. And the case that I was referring to was related to an international agreement, principles between Kosovo and Serbia related to association of municipalities and the right to make a legislative initiative. And that is where some of the items, they were found unconstitutional. So that is why in Kosovo we see very few initiatives related to amendments to the Constitution. Most recently, there is a huge debate on making an amendment to establish an army, which is not supported because of this rigid restriction on the changes of the Constitution. So that's it. And I would just like to make a short example on the issue of the salaries of the judges. We just had recent a new Prime Minister of Kosovo issue a decision to increase salaries for the ministers and himself, and he did not know that that has a direct link legally with the salaries of the judges. So the salaries of the judges are increased 100% in Kosovo. The decision was challenged before the court, but it was not on the increase, it was different, it was on the separation of powers issue. But a new Prime Minister and I guess the advisors were not very well prepared, and the judges have new salaries, 100%. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. President Zuliok is,
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Dürr. To answer this question is very difficult. This is it is about two very difficult theoretical principle achievements of historical constitution and the national or constitutional identity. Both is very complex principles, but if we but there is a simple approach to, if we can define that the achievements of the historical constitution is a static thing, and the constitutional identity is a developing principle. It is not a static. The content of this principle is not static. This is in development, and we can see this in development only. But the achievements of the historical constitution, it is made. It is a static a principle. I cannot speak more. I think about this problem it would be written more books too. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. C'est très intéressant, naturellement, mais je suis naturellement pas. Je ne suis pas capable d'intervenir. Non, je dois. Mais c'était monsieur après vous et après vous, oui. Non, c'était ce monsieur était le
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dragoljub Sharif. I'm the Deputy Chief Justice of the Supreme Constitutional Court of Egypt. I'm very much conscious about time limitations, so I will try to be very brief. But let me first of all start by thanking the Constitutional Court of Andorra for giving us this opportunity to get together here today as members of the constitutional jurisdiction all over the world and to celebrate this marvelous occasion. I will have a time slot tomorrow when I can really extend my appropriate thanks to them. But for the time being, just really the opening ceremony as well as the preceding session have been very stimulating, raising a number of issues of common concern to all of us as members of the constitutional judiciaries of the world. And I'm sure that the time limitation won't allow me to go through all of them, but I've just picked very, very few points trying to highlight or to comment on some of them. First of all, the point that made from the Lithuanian justice about the constitution amendments and the power of the Constitutional Court of Lithuania to review these amendments is a bit really vague for me, at least, simply because extending the power of a Constitutional Court to really review the Constitution itself. I know the Constitutional Court interprets the Constitution and gives the Constitution its meaning and its shape. Nonetheless, to go beyond this, to really articulate or re-articulate the Constitution document itself, this really needs further elaboration and discussion. Secondly, the point made about the rule of law within the president of the Hungarian Constitutional Court that had to do with reconciliation to protect human rights and fundamental human rights and other state interests is a very valid point. And this is exactly what we do, all of us. It's politics, the politics of the judiciary, wherein we are faced with a situation wherein you have to strike a balance between these basic human rights that are violated and also the necessities of really having the state playing its role. It's a compromise to be made, it's a reconciliation that we have to go through it, but at the end of the day, our target has to do, always, with protecting fundamental human rights. For the presentation of the Latvian, justice, and the issue of financial security. Well, I believe this is an issue that concerns all of us. We are all very keen on having our financial status established, and we always push for that, and really we look to each other for other jurisdiction, or whether other country has raised the judicial salaries or not. But within our own jurisdiction, within our own countries, there is really a problematic really a trend that is always existing, that whenever you raise judges' salaries or try to raise judges' salary, other sector of the society complain. So why you're raising judges' salary and not raising the parliamentary salaries? Why you're raising them and forget about the army or the police? And all these, discussion we have on raising the salary would impact at the end of the day not to have these salary increase. Because even if the state is willing to raise judicial salary, they find themselves unable to do that because they are unable to satisfy all sectors of the society, and therefore they get into other tracks by having these system of bonuses or whatever, by raising a salary, not on a constitutional basis, but rather on administrative level. And this means that the salary you get is not constitutionally guaranteed. And therefore, it would impact on judicial independence of judges themselves. And for Kosovo, Mr. President, really, I know you are very dissatisfied with the attacks on the court. We are all, dissatisfied with whatever attacks we get. But that is healthy, I believe. It's really, whenever we get attacked, it means that we are doing the right job, and that's why other people are not satisfied. I'm going to reflect on this tomorrow in my presentation with more elaboration. The last point is about the role.
Oh, sorry. Yes, go on.
My last point?
Shortly. Yes, last point.
I forget to congratulate you for the raising of your salary, so sorry. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll stop here.
So you will have a short response, please. Who? Yeah. Do you want? Yes, maybe very short. Yes, maybe let us collect now. Monsieur, et après ça c'est... So, Monsieur, yes, he was the first. Sorry for... He was first. In the back. In the back. Yes, maybe quite short. Nous vous prions d'intervenir brièvement, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you. I will be brief. I'm the Chief Justice of Eswatini. May I first thank the Constitutional Court of Andorra for inviting me and my delegation and for hosting us. Thank you very much. And again, let me first congratulate you for celebrating 25 years of the establishment of the Constitutional Court of Andorra. I have two questions. I'll be brief. The first question I'll direct to the President of the Court of Algeria. In your opinion, which are the most important features that enhance the competence of the Constitutional Court? The second question I will direct to the Vice President of Latvia. She talked about financial security of judges. My question is it the executive branch of government that deals with the terms and conditions of judges, or it is an independent body that has got no link or no influence from the executive arm of government? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We take together all the questions now, and we have then cumulative answers. But le prochain, ça c'est Monsieur le Président de la Cour constitutionnelle du Maroc, et après c'est il signor giudice alla Corte Costituzionale Italiana. Ma dopo il Presidente del Marocco mi scuso, è così. C'est le Président qui...
Well,
you were before?
I raised my hand first, but you can...
Sorry, I did not see you from this perspective.
My name is Rumen Nenkov. I came from the Bulgarian Constitutional Court. I would stress on two questions just. First, about the money compensation which the judges receive. I agree with everything that our colleague from Latvia said, but I doubt whether it could be a comment, not or a rhetoric question. I doubt that we should consider judges as a privileged group of society, especially in case of economic crisis. Because all the highest levels of the other powers also need the independence in taking decisions. And the link should exist. But let us not, this approach could be, if we consider a judge as a privileged group in such a situation, this approach would lead, may put in danger the public respect to justice. I'm afraid of that. And secondly, especially in the first section, we were said that our colleague from the Constitutional Court of our host here said that it's put up the question about the decisions of the court which go against the majority of the will of the people. Well, if the judges think before they give their decision, if they think what will be the public effect, the effect of the response of the politicians, the response of the media, the response of the majority of society, before issuing a decision, I don't believe that this is justice. You know, law exists to protect minorities, not majorities. Majorities are strong enough to impose their will against the minorities. And this is why we should, as a rule, we shouldn't expect that the decisions of the courts are popular. Many times they are not popular. But if a judge who is absolutely sure that his decision will be in line with the Constitution, with these values which are enclosed in the Constitution, with these principles, but he is afraid of the public effect, of the public response, he'd better resign. This is my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, tout brièvement, je vous prie, Monsieur le Président de la Cour constitutionnelle du Maroc, et après il giudice à la Corte. Ma then we have one more question, but please, then we have to conclude because we have a strict timetable. Though. Yes, but Monsieur le Président. Yeah, he's a president. He's a Cour de Maroc. Then here, then here. Yes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci. Je voudrais remercier Monsieur le Président du tribunal de la Principauté d'Andorre pour l'accueil très chaleureux qu'il nous a réservé. Et je voudrais être très bref, comme ça j'obéis à vos instructions en tant que président. Je voulais dire tout simplement, à la lumière de ce qui est des travaux qui ont été proposés, je voudrais simplement dire à Madame la représentante, la vice-présidente de la Létonie, est-ce qu'il n'y a pas une contradiction entre la séparation des pouvoirs et le fait que l'augmentation des indemnités du juge dépende du pouvoir exécutif? Parce qu'il faut passer par une loi de finances qui est votée par la Chambre par le Parlement, et en même temps qui est tributaire, dans le cadre, nous l'avons vu, du renforcement de l'exécutif depuis quelque temps par rapport au pouvoir judiciaire. Est-ce qu'il n'y a pas là une atteinte, ou alors des problèmes, évidemment, qui vont se poser, n'est-ce pas, pour les juges, parce qu'ils dépendent du pouvoir exécutif et du ministère des Finances et du budget. Et c'est le pouvoir exécutif qui est maître justement de cette décision. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. Allora, Signor Giudice, prego, as a last question, then afterwards. Now, yes.
Oui, je suis Giulio Prosperetti, je suis membre de la Cour constitutionnelle italienne. En fait, je ne veux pas poser une question, mais je voudrais faire quelques considérations adjonctives sur la belle présentation du président Dominique Rousseau de ce matin. Donc, je vais souligner un aspect particulier sur le rapport entre la représentance populaire et les valeurs de la démocratie représentative. Nous devons considérer que dans le moderne système politique, dans les républiques parlementaires, elles se gouvernent avec les lois, mais l'application technique de ces lois est très compliquée. Pourtant, la volonté populaire et la représentance parlementaire pour garantir une réelle démocratie ont la nécessité des organisations capables de spécifier les contenus des dispositions normatives de la loi, donc donnant des règlements particuliers. Dans le système juridique italien, cette tâche est garantie pour les authorities, organismes indépendants qui ont le pouvoir de régler toutes ces matières techniques. Nous avons plusieurs autorités, l'antitrust, la garantie contre l'autorité fiscale et bureaucratique, et l'autorité pour les communications, l'autorité pour la surveillance sur les contrats publics, l'autorité pour l'énergie et le gaz, sur la grève dans les services publics, sur les contrôles sur l'assurance privée, sur les données sensibles, sur l'enfance, etc. Donc, les valeurs de la représentante politique vont balancer avec des organismes indépendants qui peuvent spécifier les dispositions des lois dans l'intérêt de tout le monde et surtout des minorités. À ce propos, je voudrais souligner que la Cour constitutionnelle italienne devra affronter les nouveaux problèmes de l'admission des questions de constitutionnalité soulevées devant la Cour par les authorities à propos des lois que ces authorities doivent appliquer. Je crois que ça, c'est un problème très intéressant pour balancer tous les problèmes entre la représentance tout court et celle qui est technique, et la technique qui doit garantir les droits individuels. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Et finalement, je dois souligner que s'il y a d'autres questions, à l'après-midi, il y aura aussi une possibilité à l'après-midi.
Voilà, je pense que
c'est monsieur, oui.
Maintenant,
Please,
on va donner la parole pour répondre. Et cet après-midi, on aura 1h30 de discussion. Donc, je suis désolé, mais les collègues qui n'ont pas pu poser leurs questions ce matin pourront le poser, puisque... Oui, non, cet après-midi, de 16h, je regarde... Voilà, de 16h à 17h30. De 16h à 17h30, on aura donc 1h30 de discussion. Par conséquent, je vous remercie de décaler vos interventions afin de nous permettre de déjeuner tranquillement.
Has an integrated document of Ahtisaari plan, which is an internationally plan foreseen for the resolution of status of Kosovo, which has provided certain international guarantees that Kosovo has to respect in order to have the status which has now, and that is to protect communities or minorities, to respect international treaties and conventions that are directly applicable in the Constitution, and how that is done through the Constitutional Court. As I said, by requiring double two-thirds majority, and then we have to have in mind the composition of the Constitutional Court, which was until 2 weeks ago. The Constitutional Court had and still has 9 judges, 3 were international judges, 2 were judges from communities or minorities, 1 Serb and 1 other minority, which means 5, and 4 were Albanian or majority majority population representing Kosovo. So in order to have an amendment voted by the majority in the assembly, which means even there would need 2/3 of double, even minorities, because all this is to protect the integrity of other states, neighboring states, in order not to change borders and all these. And in order to do this, first the parliament needs to have double 2/3, which is very difficult, and we see that on everyday basis, or impossible. But even if they manage in the parliament, then in the constitutional court, you would have a majority of judges which do not come from the majority population, but it had international minorities. So this is why in Kosovo it was foreseen like that. But now, even though that we will have only national judges, since 2 weeks, still the new judges are not decreed, it means that we still have to respect the international guarantees, which we have committed that we will respect, and that will be done through the double third and the constitutional principles and everything. And I will just go back because, Vice President, we just had recently the case also related to the salaries, and in us, and in the case of Kosovo, it was not, it was raised, intention was to be raised as a case related to separation of powers, but in the substance of the request, it was the salary, the amount. And this is where we said that as a constitutional court, we are not going to set what is the salary. That is not, it all depends, the scope of the referral and the decision depends on the request of the party. We are not going to go further than what the party requested. And the party said that this is a violation of the separation of powers, which was mentioned by Honorable Judge, because the decision of the government, which decided on increasing the salaries of the members of the government and specific civil servants, is interfering with the authority of the assembly to exercise its authority in approving the loan budget, which is not the case, because that is not preventing the assembly to approve. So it was not, if the case would have been differently submitted before the court, we would have to go and to say how and why. And then I heard congratulations, the salaries 100% were raised to the judges of the regular courts, not to the constitutional court. As we as a constitutional court, we were in a different situation always by law and by constitution. So for us, I meant sarcastically just to say what happened, and of course the government stands that intention was to increase the but what is happening now, that we see a flux of dissatisfaction throughout the country, and doctors saying why we are less important, and firefighters and everybody. So let's see how things will develop, but I think it is a process which should be some sort of comprehensive, and I'm just sharing the experience, last experience in the last months in Kosovo. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so I see that, yes, please, monsieur. Le microphone.
Mike?
Microphone, please. Hop là. No, this one.
Je voudrais tout d'abord, en remerciant le collègue qui a posé la question, m'excuser auprès de l'ensemble de ceux qui étaient dans la salle au moment où j'ai pris la parole, parce que j'ai dû certainement parler trop vite en français, de sorte que la traduction en anglais devait peut-être être insuffisante, ce qui justifie la question posée par mon collègue. Très rapidement, donc, les axes fondamentaux ou les aspects fondamentaux de l'intervention du Conseil, c'est d'abord le contrôle de constitutionnalité, a priori. Donc, il concerne le référendum, il concerne les lois organiques, il concerne les règlements intérieurs des chambres, et il concerne, à la demande des minorités parlementaires, 50 députés ou 30 membres du Conseil de la Nation qui, avant promulgation d'une loi qui vient d'être votée, estiment que cette loi-là n'est pas constitutionnelle. Ceci pour ce qui est du contrôle a priori. Pour le contrôle a posteriori, c'est ce que vous appelez en France le QPC, c'est-à-dire toutes les lois qui peuvent être virusées et qui peuvent revenir à travers un procès au Conseil constitutionnel pour qu'il puisse arbitrer la constitutionnalité ou la non-constitutionnalité. deux points supplémentaires, si vous permettez, puisqu'il y a eu des discussions sur les amendements de Constitution et sur les salaires. Très rapidement. Pour les amendements à la Constitution algérienne, je ne sais pas si elle est singulière de ce point de vue-là, a prévu dans un article la liste des articles qui ne peuvent pas bouger, qu'il est impossible de bouger. Ensuite, pour ce qui est des salaires, l'autonomie financière et administrative du Conseil constitutionnel l'amène à élaborer un budget lui-même. Mais ce budget est transmis à l'Assemblée pour que l'Assemblée puisse l'examiner. Il est transmis par le canal du Premier ministre qui ne le modifie pas. Il l'envoie. À charge pour l'Assemblée, si elle juge que c'est utile, d'appeler un membre du Conseil constitutionnel ou son représentant pour s'expliquer du contenu du budget. Parce que l'indépendance outrancière et totale pour se fixer sa propre rémunération, c'est peut-être une utopie. C'est peut-être une utopie et ça peut conduire loin. Ceci étant, je vais vous rassurer dans l'autre sens, la crise économique, elle frappe tout le monde. Et en 2017, le Conseil constitutionnel a pris la décision par lui-même, sans que personne ne lui ait demandé de le faire, de réduire le salaire de ses membres de 10% pendant une année. Merci.
Merci, Monsieur Medeci. Alors, on peut progresser un peu. One more.
Dear colleagues, thank you, but as I understand the President's proposal to speak during later, if you would like, I can make some comments, but now or later? Later. In the evening, yes. I will save time for lunch. Okay, I will speak in the evening.
Yes. So thank you very much. I think I have now completed my function here, and I thank all the helpers and participants. Merci beaucoup. Alors, la conclusion.
We did it.
À vous. Très bon. Alors,
Very good topic.
c'est very interesting.